Hello and welcome to today's webinar titled Introduction to Oracle Database 19C New Features and Benefits. This webinar is being presented by Barbara, Senior Principal Instructor of Core Technologies. Oracle Database 19C is the final long-term support release of the Oracle Database 12C family of products, which includes Oracle Database 18C. This latest release of the world's most popular database also introduces new functionalities, providing customers with a multi-model enterprise-class database for all their typical use cases. Throughout this webinar, Barbara will introduce attendees to some of the new features available in Oracle 19C. During this live session, attendees will benefit from a short overview of Oracle's Training on Demand curriculum and will be given the opportunity to download additional documentation relevant to topics discussed. As mentioned during the webinar, everyone's phones will be muted. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll host a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And if you enjoy the presentation today and are interested in learning more about training anywhere with our interactive virtual platform called IMVP, please visit our website or contact us. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to each and every one of you by the end of the week. All right, let's get started. Take it away, Barbara.
All right, you can go ahead and change the slide, Lori, please. My name again is Barbara Waddoups, and I'm going to be presenting on Oracle 19C. It's going to be a short overview of it. We're going to focus on this little short area. The first thing we want to look at is general enhancements. So if you could just change the slide out here. This is just going to be some information that is general in nature. What we is that when we start up or go out and create our database, when we're using our installer, we can go through and have an option to automate that root script execution. So we're not going to, as DBAs or whoever's doing the install, be queried during the process of doing the install for that root user credential. This is a very nice and helpful piece that we have, especially if you want to go through and automate the process. Go to the next slide, please. Something else that we have out here in 19C is the ability for the DBCA to go out and clone or relocate a remote PDB. This is very advantageous. Sorry, excuse me. I've been talking for the last hour, so I apologize. What we're looking at here is going out, and if I use the create from remote PDB command, if I was going out and creating a script within for my DBCA to run, I could go out and through my database link request that a remote PDB go and be cloned as another PDB in. I can also go out and do a relocate PDB command to go through and relocate that PDB somewhere else. Now, when we do this process, if we take a look at the picture we've got, I've got CDB2 at the bottom, I've got CDB1 at the top. We're going to go out and relocate PDB1, which is down in CDB2, over to CDB2. Now, in this case, we would not have any data files moving, as opposed to going out and creating it from a remote PDB where I could go out and have those data files moved. So there's a little bit of a difference out here depending on what you're looking to do. But in either case, it's very, very easy to go out and do this process. Next slide. Some additional information about your PDBs. Today, we can go out and create a snapshot from our PDB that allows us to have more control over. Before, we could go out and take a snapshot of a PDB as well. We just didn't have all of the options that we have in 19C. So over here, I have a parameter that can control the level of content that I want to go out and use with this snapshot. I can go out and say I want that particular snapshot to be sparse, where I'm not getting all of the data files. or it can be false, where I want to go out and get all of them. So we have true or false, depending on what level that particular control mechanism. It is something that gives the DBA a little bit more option when we're going out and doing this work. If we look down at the bottom, we have some identifiers out here as far as where you could find information about your new snapshot that you've gone through and created. You can look at the DBA PDBS to see the snapshot name now, and you can see the DBA PDB snapshot file to see additional information associated with it that's more distinct for that particular container. Next slide. Some additional options we have with data pump, and these are really nice when we start thinking of moving our data. If you wanted to go out and allow your tablespaces to stay in a read-only mode during a transportable tablespace import, you can. This really gives you a good benefit, because now I can have that tablespace data file being mounted on 2 different databases, but it would have to be remaining in a read-only manner in order to do that. We also have to be careful, because your source and the target database have to be on the same daylight saving time edition or version. Otherwise, you're going to have inconsistency in the date and time, and that's not going to prove beneficial or even something you would want to do if you were going out and doing this TTS import. It goes out in this case and restores a pre-12.2 data pump type of behavior, what we had in the past. It is similar, but it's a better mechanism today than what we had in the past. We could also go through and enable skipping of the rebuild of our bitmaps when we're going out and doing some work. So I can reclaim my free space if I wanted to, but we can skip that. The reason we would want to do that is so that as we're moving or going out and doing our work, this just gives us a little bit of an advantage in reducing the amount of time it would take to go out and manage these particular types of objects. So it would leave your table space in a read-only. Your bitmaps were not going to be rebuilt at that time. Your time zones, if they are different, you could then see that the time zone column would be dropped, because we're not going out and doing the rebuild. I can go through and opt out of running my closure checks. Again, looking at data pump, when I'm going out and working with a transportable table space or a full transportable export. This gives you increased availability, because you're not taking the time for the closure checks to go out and validate your particular data that's moving. Now, you would want to do this if you know that you're not going to have any issues. If you are unsure of that, then I would consider going out and using that closure check anyway. You can also go out and suppress your encryption clause on your import. This is very beneficial when you're looking at Oracle Cloud migrations. If you have non-cloud databases out there that you're migrating that have encrypted clauses. So you can tell, or encrypted columns, you can tell the system that you don't need to worry about that. When we're looking at resource usage limits for data pump, this is something that can be very helpful. I can go through and control the number of jobs that get started when I'm going out and working in a multi-tenant environment on those databases. I can also go out and control the number of parallel workers that I would have available for individual data pump jobs within the multi-tenant environment. Next slide. All right, we're going to take a quick look at security enhancements out here. Some things that become important for us, again, is if you do have database vault out there, we want to be able to go out and have more controls about being able to access data from the database vault level when I'm looking at the PDB. Before, we didn't really have this level of control. Now we can go out through the database vault operations and protect the sensitive data at the PDB level, and we don't have to go out and create realms or command rules that we had to do before to go out and protect that data. So it really frees up the process of doing this in a more intuitive manner for the protection. Next slide. We also have, when we're looking at the database vault operations, we have the ability to go out and grant that DB or the database vault owner that role locally in that CDB root. So this gives you the ability to have common users out here to be able to do more work within the database vault operation controlling mechanisms. So if I'm going to go out and do this, I can go out and configure my database vault and force the local DB owner to be true out here. That's what we had in 18C. What we want to do is go out and now in 19C add in more options. So we'd still go out and grant that, but we also have those particular users being able to do more activity, which may be beneficial depending on how you set up your environment. Looking at the database vault command rules out here, we have a way to go out and have a unique identifier when we're looking at the rules that we go out and create. Before, we didn't have this. We didn't have the ability to have a way to distinctly define that. So now I have my command. I have my object out here that is going to be part of that definition of that particular policy. And we see that in red when we look down at the bottom. Next slide. We also go through and we would have auditing, or the option to go out and audit top-level statements only. That allows you to go out and just look at the direct information and not secondary type of auditing. So in this case, if I'm looking down at the last two fields that we have out there, or blocks, what we're doing is minimizing those audit records. In that case, if it was something direct, I would be going out and managing that from an auditing perspective. But it is something that I'm calling from a particular procedure. We're not going to go out and audit it. It is not a direct statement. Next option, or next slide. One of the things we had in 18C as well as 12C is the ability to go out and capture privilege analysis, meaning I want to see what the users' privileges they have and which privileges they don't have. So, and that they're not using. So what we want to do is go out and have that available now as part of the Oracle Database Vault, and it's also available as within the Database Enterprise Edition, something that is really helpful now instead of having to do it in a different way. Going out and looking at your operations on Oracle Managed and User Managed Tablespaces when we've got them encrypted in the TDE, what we're doing out now is allowing operations on that encrypted Oracle Managed Tablespaces when we're going out and working in our PDB and the CDB. So we can use our options now to go out and move with our key store migration, and we can do this for all of the data except that would go out and work with that encrypted metadata. Next slide. We can also go through in 19C and allow the database to recognize when you have a password file location change. Right now, we can't do that. In 19C, we can go out and run an alter system flush password file metadata cache to let it refresh the cache, and now the database knows that the particular password file has changed. Next slide. Going to look at some availability enhancements out here when we're going out and working with our recovery catalog. Recovery catalog is part of your RMAN system. So in 18C out here, when I was using the recovery catalog, I would have to access the container database to go out and access that target for the backup of a PDB. Today, we can go directly to that PDB, which is what we see on the second point on our slide. Next slide. When we're looking at 19C, we have new compression available, the standard, which is going to be more beneficial to us when we're looking at larger data. We have that in addition to what we had before. Next slide. When we're working with Oracle Database Flashback, what we have now in 19C is the ability to go out and have an automatic purge of reclaimable flashback logs, those logs that we don't necessarily need. Before, we would have to go out and do this on our own. The process would run, we might run out of space. Today, we can go out and automate it. Next slide. We also have the ability to go out, and this is a very, very good option, is I can go through and provide my restore points that I might have on my primary system over to all of my standbys. Before, we could not do that. This really helps you when you're looking at maintaining your primary in coordination with your standby. Next slide. Next slide. All right. Performance enhancements out here. we have the ability to go out and work with Memoptimized Rowstores. We had this with 18C, but what we had a problem with was being able to ingest the amount of data that was coming in very, very quickly. This is something we see in big data. If I've got a lot of streaming data coming in, I need to be able to process it as quickly as possible. In 19C, we are going out and being able to manage that data a little bit faster. So it supports those high volume, small types of transactions that are coming from maybe your phone, maybe the internet, or wherever it's coming from. The problem is we still could end up having some data loss. Inserts might have to be retried, but we are going out and managing it faster. This will improve over time. Next slide. Configuring your automatic ADDM or automatic database diagnostic manageability process or report to go out and be at the PDB level. We did not have the ability to go out and get my AWR, my automatic ADDM at the PDB level. Now we can, and this is a very, very good tool because many times when we're looking at troubleshooting our data or our database, we want to be able to look down at the PDB level, especially if I'm dealing with application data. Next slide. Another piece as far as going out and managing the way that we do our work. One of the things that is extremely beneficial for your SQL developers is now I do not need to give my SQL developers the select catalog role in order to go out and do some troubleshooting on their, or debugging on their particular code. That means they can run something called the SQL monitor. And I can get that information. I don't need to go out and ask the DBA to have that select catalog role to go out and have permission to certain data dictionary objects because I no longer need them. This is a great boon to our developers. Next slide. When I'm going out and looking at SQL execution plans, comparing them out here, before in 18C, I had different methods of going out and comparing those plans. I could do lots of different work. But today, if we can move that slide up, I don't know if you can move the page up a little bit, Lori, I'm not sure. But today, what we can do, oops, maybe it's not going to come up too well, that's okay. Today, we can go out and list different cursor cache objects, not just two. I can go out and compare many. And this takes over for what we had before. This is really good because now I have a larger set of data that I can go out and compare at one time instead of having to do multiple passes to go out and look at that comparison. Next slide. Going along and looking at some of our availability out here. When we go through and we start populating data into memory, we need to kind of understand how long it's going to take to get that data out there. We'd like to know about that particular priority that we set on the data and how quickly it is getting out to be in memory. So we can go out and look at the populate wait to find out how that data is being populated in memory. So you can have it by different percentages on how much data you're looking for to determine how long it's taking to get up there. We have different return codes that would come out. 0 is going to be a populate success within the time frame that you set up. 1 would be saying I'm out of memory and so on. So we would need to kind of look at this over time, and it is something if you're definitely setting up in memory, you would want to get some idea about what is your typical allowable time that is going through and managing on your system how much time it's taking for your data to get into memory. Next slide. If you go out and you're working with developers or companies that go out and do use Oracle Replay, if you're going out and doing deep database replay, what we can do now is go out and work with this at a PDB level, not working with the entire container. Before, we could not do that. That's where you saw this Oracle Aura 20222 that says we're going out and you can't do this within a package where the PDB is not allowed. Can't do that. Now we can go through and do it at that level. Again, this is something that when I work with the developers, they really like this, especially if you're using database replay. Next slide. When we start looking at going out and working with supplemental logging, when you're working with your subset of database replication, you would have your enable for Golden Gate replication to be true. And now I have the ability to go out and control supplemental logging, depending on what I might need. So for tables out here, for minimal supplemental logging, for tables with no column, supplemental logging for tables that have no replication. You have options now that are a little bit broader and more easier to control than we had before. Next slide. For fine-grained supplemental logging, you would still have that enable Golden Gate replication, but you can go through and then disable as well. It's the same types of things that we were talking about. In this case, what I would do is I would say create table and then maybe disable logical replication, or alter table and disable logical replication. Depending on the amount of logging you want, this can really be helpful as you're going out and doing some of your replication. Next slide. We're going to look a little at big data out here and data warehousing. We have a automatic indexing task now, which is great help when we're looking at going out and working with this big data out here. So we have an automatic task that you can go out and invoke when we're going out and working with those big workloads that are running. So we can go out and create and re-enable or rebuild, disable, drop, and make indexes invisible if that's what you want to do. You can also get a nice information about the impact of those particular indexes that you might have. And it does really do you some good as far as improving the performance of your DMLs with your triggers, because it's automatic at this point. It's going to reduce your resource overhead that you would normally use. Next slide. Again, a little bit more information on that. If you are going to go out and do your automatic indexing out here, you have some views that you can go out and take a look at to show you the different executions out here of your tasks that ran, what those actions were that went out and actually were performed. And you can have various information about the different actions from the SQL statements that were going out and being verified by your auto indexing. Next slide. If you're working with hybrid partition tables, usually we're thinking about big data in this time. What I'm looking about is how I'm going out and managing that data. So I can have my partitions out here from not just the database tables, but also from my external tables on my Linux system. So it could be a Hadoop system perhaps that I need to go out and have partitioned. So now what we're seeing in here is the ability to go out and define whether a partition is external as well as it is local or from the database tables themselves. And how I set this up would be determined based off of where the data is. Next slide. If you want to go out and have some of this hybrid partition tables be put in memory, you can, but we have to be careful about what we're doing. So my external partitions would be in the buffer cache typically. My internal partitions would normally be out there in memory itself, but they can work together in order for the system to keep track of where that data is when we're going out and managing it through our code. Next slide. If you want to go out and manually populate your in-memory external tables, you can. I can simply go out. We had that in 18C. I can populate a particular object out there. So it's an external table. I'm manually doing it. That's the way we would have had to do it in 18C. When I'm looking at 19C out here, I can go out and then query that external table to populate it in here, just similar as we would do for an internal table. So it's more like that internal table where I'm querying and then having that data put into memory. So it gives you a little bit of a better performance. Next slide. When we're looking at querying that data in parallel in memory for external tables, when I'm looking at 19C, I would simply go out, set my query rewrite and my integrity to be still tolerated for the data. I'm going to go out and define my parallel option, my hint, and grab that, and then I can select that information from my cursor to see what was going on. Up above, we simply were going out and altering the session and set query rewrite integrity to be still tolerated, but I didn't have the ability to go out and use the parallel statement. Next slide. If you're going out and working with big data or data from other areas, then you can go out and have support for that data when we're working with Oracle Loader or Oracle Data Pump. In 18C, we could work with the loader. Now when we're looking at 19C, in addition to the loader component, we have the ability to have data of a type Oracle Hive or Oracle Big Data. So it is really very, very good for that fast streaming data that we have coming in. We saw some options out there for fast ingesting through the Memoptimized as well. We're going toward a lot of that type of support for that very large data that we do have to manage. Next slide. All right, some diagnosing type of enhancements that we have for your incident. What we can do out here and have an automated service component for going out and grabbing the information for your incident and being able to send it up to Oracle really, really quickly. Now that is part of what we're talking about here as far as your fault prediction, your detection, and your fixation. So you as an individual or the DBA as an individual doesn't have to do all of that work. We can quickly get that information together. We already have incidents created, but we can then go out and send it to Oracle and also get some information from our system to diagnose it and repair it very quickly. Next slide. The SQL Test Builder export procedure is something that gives us some new control options. So before, I could go out, if I'm looking at a test case builder, and I could get compiler traces. So I can see what was going on in that particular query. But in 19C, we get a lot more benefits. We have more control options to go out and manage the parallel execution, code generation. I can get traces at different levels of information. When I'm going out and looking at issues, I can go out and specify what type of issue I'm looking at, performance or wrong results or compilation or execution. I can also go out and look at the test case builder to define what data it is that I'm looking at, because it's going to be more specific according to the PDB where it's working within. And we can go out and also the test builder is going to ensure that your exported files aren't going to have any security related information in it, like passwords or information that it would have gotten from other PDBs. We would have a default directory that would be associated with that object and that test case that you just ran. It's a very good mechanism. Looking at this SQL Diagnostic and Repair, now what we have, if I'm looking at what I had in 18C and before, I had to create a diagnostic test. I could set a tuning parameter. I could go out and execute the diagnostic task, and I could go out and accept a SQL patch. Those were all individual pieces. In 19C, we can have this all combined into one. So we have this incident ID, which we were talking about before. So if your incident ID didn't already exist, then the DBMS ADR is going to create that incident for you. So especially if you want to go out and give this information to Oracle Support, I can define the SQL text, the problem scope that I want to have associated with it. In this case, it's going to be performance. Scope out here, the comprehensive type of a review, and we want to be able to apply a patch if it's given to us automatically. So this is something that you really combines what we had to do in many pieces into one. So it really does improve the time period it would take to go out and do this type of diagnosis and repair. Next slide. Next slide. Lori, can you hear me? Lori, can you hear me?
Yeah. Support for multiple PDB shards in the same CDB. Do you see that slide?
No, I'm seeing the SQL Diagnostic and Repair. No, I don't know what's going on. It could be that I'm just losing connection. My system's going out and reconnecting. 1 second.
Okay.
Everything was going so well. All right. What I'm seeing now is the sharding enhancements.
Yes.
Okay, great. All righty, we're good. Thank you so much for waiting. Next slide, please. Okay, looking at sharding. Sharding is kind of when you're thinking of the database, is somewhat new. It's been around for a little bit, but a lot of people it is new for them. So in 18C, when I'm looking at sharding, I could only have one table family per a sharded database. In 19C, we can actually have more, which is a nice option out here. So you could have data in the same chunks when I'm looking at the sharding component, or I could have data from for different applications in one particular sharded database, which is very beneficial for activity or for your applications. And we would have our system managed databases only, and we would have a new option to go out and configure table families to enable some of this. Next slide. In 18C, when we were looking at going out and working with our shards out here, you could have a shard and a shard catalog be within a particular, or for a particular PDB in a container database. And we would have only that -CDB option. It was literally at that level. When we're working at a 19C, we have PDB shards and the shard catalogs that could be with different sharded databases that could go out and reside in your container database. So now we have the ability to go out and add CDBs and PDB shards out there to your configuration. So it gives you more options for better management, especially of that data that you have in the shards. Next slide. We also have the ability to go out and generate unique sequence numbers across your shards in a more advantaged way. Before, we had to go out and manually create and manage those unique sequences that are going to be within my shards. That took a little bit of time to do that. Today, we have a unique type of sequence numbering that's going to be handled by that sharded database. So we have a new sequence object that defines whether it's a shard or a no shard. That's what we see down at the bottom in red. So you do have a much easier way to do this than what we did before. Next slide. We do have support for multi-shard query coordinators on those shard catalog standbys. Again, something that is a little bit nicer than we had before, because before those multi-shard queries could not be performed out there on my primary shard catalog database. I mean, that's what the only one it could be defined on, excuse me. When we're looking at 19C, we can go out and use that to perform on your active data guard standby, which is, again, a nice way to go out and use your data guard environment to go out and use it as a support for queries on your system. Improves your scalability and availability, and it does have a coordinator service that's associated with it. It is, from a scope of affinity, it's regional in manner. Next slide. When we're looking at going out and managing the parameter settings across our shards in 19C, this is going to be centrally managed out here, and we can propagate those particular settings that you have created across the shard or from your shard catalog to the various others. We can use an enable shard DDL, again, also on that shard catalog. Next slide. Looking at Oracle 19C, this was a very, very quick review of what we have out there. What I would highly suggest is that if you have customers who want to go out and get more information about 19C, take a look at the classes. Also, you can look at TODs, which are training on demand. They give you that same option to be able to see a recorded class or a recorded set of information from an instructor that is going to give you the same information that you would get in the class. Students get a lab environment that they can set up to be run at any time that they would like. They can look at the TODs over a period of time. They get a lot of opportunity. If a student has a problem with a TOD lesson, they can always go out and make a request to talk to an instructor. Instructors are required to go out and report back to that student within 24 hours. So it's a really, really nice way to go out and get some information to understand about the 19C system. We don't have anything outside of the new features associated with 19C from a direct class. But if you go through and look at the 18C classes where you've got administration workshop or managing the multi-tenant, those would be something that would be directly associated with 18C. Some of our more agnostic classes are not going to have a particular edition or version set up against them. They are going to be good for anything up to the 18C. So as 19C becomes more fluid out there in the scope of what users are going out and doing, we'll probably see much more coming about for 19C. All right, that is my lecture component. I did see that there was a couple of questions out there, and I'm going to hand it back over to Lori out here to work with those students, or those, sorry, not students, members who are going out and listening so that we can go out and address that. I apologize, I'm teaching today also.
Thank you, Barbara, and I apologize for the technical difficulties today. I think we've lost our Michelle, our usual webinar host, but we will keep the line open for another couple of minutes to entertain questions from anybody. I do have one question here in the chat, Barbara, from Samir, and he says, can we perform all PDB-related enhanced features from OEM?
That's a very good question. And actually, not everything yet. It is going to get pushed down there, but they're not all enabled at this time.
Okay. Any more questions? We'll hold the line open for a couple of more minutes. You can put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And for those that you have attended today, this webinar is being recorded. Tomorrow an email will be sent out with a link to the recorded version so you can view at your leisure and take advantage of the links to some of the courses and training we offer for Oracle. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions popping up. So, Barbara, I don't want to take any more of your time. To all the attendees, thank you again for attending our session on Oracle Database 19C. Thanks for suffering with us through the technical difficulties. And thank you, Barbara. We'll be sending a link to everybody tomorrow.
Thank you for everybody to attend as well. Goodbye.
Bye.